Brilliant. Hi everyone, I hope you've had a good break and a great morning in the plenary session. So it's a great pleasure to introduce this workshop, which is embracing the entrepreneurial spirit to improve organisational and team performance. And I'm going to introduce Stephanie Barnes-Taylor, who's a fabulous career strategist. She embraces the opportunity to create the extraordinary. Stephanie helps women to become influential leaders in the marketplace and their communities through her transformational coaching program, Fabulous University, where women learn to lead with brilliance. So, yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yes. I am so glad to be with you and so glad to share with you some of the ways that you can be an entrepreneur before you become an entrepreneur or without even becoming one. And I did want to just share a little bit more about kind of how I've actually used this in my career as an entrepreneur, but also in my career in a corporate setting. And as you mentioned, I'm primarily a coach. I work primarily with women. I work with some men too to help them navigate their career paths. And I also research ways to expand the capacity of women in leadership. But I got my start as a healthcare attorney. I worked for about 20 years in a corporate setting as a healthcare attorney, and the last 10 years of my career as an executive. And for those of you who may be familiar with the healthcare industry or any regulated industry, you know, you may recognize how rigid sometimes the environments are because you're operating within a regulatory environment. So the way that my colleagues and I began to describe how we made progress was we called it relentless incrementalization. And what we meant by that was, we were working really hard and making all of these efforts, but the steps were incremental, very small, and it took a lot of effort and a lot of different steps to have the breakthrough. So over time, I began thinking about how, as a healthcare attorney, working within a framework, because when you're in a regulated industry or any industry that you are working with, either especially multinational companies, you're trying to navigate all of these different rules, sometimes it's restricting in terms of what you can do. So I began to think about, how can we bring innovation, creativity, and really have the breakthrough performance that we need at the team level, at the individual level, at the team level, and at the organizational level, but still work within the corporate constraints that we may have, or at least those things that affect us. And the thing I recognize, in working with leaders and working with people on teams and in trying to get that breakthrough, you have people basically in 4 stages where they had to think about how they are in their leadership path and their ability to influence. And I like to use the term boss. All right, people who are bosses, because whether you are in a position of authority or not, you still have the ability to lead and influence from where you are. So I like to think about bosses in these 4 stages. The first is a boss on the rise. This is when you are in your emerging leadership stage, and this can also be in terms of a team when you're in that formation stage of a team. The next is a boss on the move. Okay, this is once you have attained your leadership position, maybe, or leadership responsibilities. You have a project that you're managing. You have or an actual department or division that you're over. And so now you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I move from being the one who is taking direction to being the one that is given direction and responsibility for moving things forward. Then you reach the boss stage, where you are established in your leadership, where you've got some experience, you've got some things that you've accomplished, but you want to become even better. And then the last stage is when or if one ever makes the decision to become an actual entrepreneur. You decide to leap to be your own boss, literally. So I want you to think through these kind of both for yourself as well as the people that you're working with, is that you're going to have people in all of these different stages. And so it's important to not only lead from where you are, but to lead others from where they are. Because the way that you are going to connect with a boss on the rise is going to be different than the way you connect with a boss. Because they have different experiences, different expectations, and so it's important to recognize that. And as an entrepreneur, one of the most important things about being successful is being in touch with your customers and your clients. Now, all of you, I'm sure, have patronized an entrepreneur. It's probably some of your favorite vendors, your favorite businesses, the places that you make your purchases from or get your services from. You know, for those of those that are owned by entrepreneurs rather than extensions of corporations, you know, there's a reason that you continue to go back to them. There's a reason that you are loyal to that business as opposed to others. And it's because they have figured out how to connect with you from where you are, what your desires are, what your needs are, and to package everything in a way that appeals to you. So that's something that is really important to do. So I'm going to get into the slide. I'm going to get this to you. And just kind of go over what our objectives are. So what we want to do is think about the practical habits of successful entrepreneurs. What do they do? What is the mindset that they have? And then how can you adapt that to your organizational setting? I'm going to put my timer on. You know, how can you adapt that to what it is that you do? Also, we want to engage in deliberative exercises. So what you have is your handout, and it is not only for you to take notes on, but at the end of each, because I'm going to go through some points, and then at the first part of it, at the end of each point, I want you to actually think about how you can apply it. Because it's great to come here and listen and learn things, but it is a better experience for you when you can actually take it back to your workplace. So throughout the presentation, we're going to actually work through some of these things, and I want you to think about how you can apply it. And then at the end, what we're going to do is break into small groups, and you can discuss some of the things that you've come up with, talk about some best practices, and then we can share with the group. And that way you're not just sitting here listening to me, although I'm sure you would love to do so. But no, I want it to be interactive for you, and I want you to get something out of it. So you're going to have exercises where you can actually apply it. And these exercises will give you a framework for how to assess what you need to do, how to develop strategy, and most importantly, how to execute. Execution is important in any business endeavor, but especially for entrepreneurs, because if you don't execute, you don't stay in business. So it's really important to develop that mindset for action and execution. So we're going to talk about these change and growth activities that you can implement for yourself individually and for your team. And the thing to think about is, with respect to this, is I want you to think about you needing a new boss, okay? And not necessarily getting rid of literally the person you report to or quitting your job. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm talking about your mindset and the way you approach things. Because you need to begin, or it is very helpful when you are able to think like an owner, even though you may not literally be an owner in the enterprise. Because one of the important things in inspiring others, especially when you are wanting to inspire others on your team to perform better, they've got to address what I call, or what's an American colloquialism, the WIFM. What's in it for me? So if you think about going back to your favorite business that you go to every day, every year, every whatever, you consistently go, there's some WIFM, again, that they've addressed. They know what you want, they know what you like, they know how you like it, and they know how to package it in a way where every time you think, you know what, it may be cheaper here, or it may be easier to get it from here, but I'm going to be loyal to this business because they are loyal to me. So it's really important to think about it from that mindset, because leading is not just about telling people what to do. It's not just about coming up with ideas and coming up with strategies, but it's connecting to the hearts of people to make them want to do it. and want to see it succeed because they have an invested interest in it. And so that's why it's important to think about, where are the people you're leading? Are they on the rise? Are they emerging? Are they established? Are they ready to leave? You know, connecting to their mindset helps you to understand how to inspire them and how to motivate them. So we want to think about this from developing what I call your boss mindset, thinking like an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs typically work in very agile environments. They work in very lean business models, lean business infrastructures. Typically, there are not a lot of resources, or if there are resources, you have to be very strategic in how you deploy it, because typically they're very small organizations. So they really focus on efficiency and being able to do the most with the least. Because one of the disadvantages of being in an organizational setting is an advantage and a disadvantage. But one of the dual-edged swords, I'll call it, of being in an organization is typically you have access to all these people. Okay, you have access to resources, you have access to all of these different things at your fingertips. And so what this can create for you is a tendency to think you need more to really get everything done. So I want you to begin thinking about, if all you had was what would be the four most critical assets, or four most critical resources, or four most critical people that you would need to get something done, and kind of begin to focus on efficiency rather than using everything you have simply because you have it. And again, as I mentioned, entrepreneurs are owners. You know, they may have investors, but for the most part, their financial livelihood rides and dies on the success of their business. So there is no safety net. So they have to operate in this environment where they have to give it their all, they have to use these resources wisely, and most of all, produce results that connect to the hearts of the people who want and need their services. So we want to think about agility, being able to respond quickly, being able to use resources efficiently and wisely, and looking at how you can use creativity and innovation to get things going. So let's all imagine that whatever department you're working in, whatever team you're on, now from this point forward, it is your business. You own it, you are responsible for its liabilities, and you have the benefits of its assets and everything that positively that comes out of that. And we'll go from there and think about, there are 10 things that you really need to focus on in terms of shifting your mindset from kind of, okay, this is how the organization runs, to this is how I can run this business like I own it. So the first thing that entrepreneurs typically have to embrace, because it's a big risk anyway to become an entrepreneur, is embracing healthy risks. Now, I want you to think about risks at 3 levels. You have risks that you take in your own career, okay, and how you make choices for what you do and how your career path expands or how it doesn't. Then the next thing to think about is risks as it relates to the people, the team that you're managing, okay? And then the third area is risks in the business that you're in. Now, how do you accomplish whatever it is that you need to accomplish? So, you know, there's no real success without healthy risk. Now, there's a big difference between reckless abandon and a healthy risk, okay? And a healthy risk is simply acknowledging the benefits, the detriments, and making a calculated and informed decision that, you know what, this may not work, but if it does, this is the benefit that's going to come from it, and that's going to outweigh, it's going to be much more of an advantage to try than to not go for this at all. Because one thing I want you to think about with respect to risks, every risk that you don't take is also a success that you're never able to achieve. I mean, you can absolutely guarantee if you don't try, you won't fail, okay? But it's important to begin to think about failures more so as lessons learned. And you don't make them again recklessly. And you do what you can to mitigate the failures. But you embrace the failure as an opportunity to move yourself forward. Because for any failed project, for any failed business deal, for any failed relationship, there's still something to be gained from it. And that, if nothing else, you learn how not to do it that way the next time. But most importantly, you're going to learn something that's going to help you get to your breakthrough. And I always like to think about inventors. And the one inventor that's often quoted as a good representation of why you just don't give up, and that's Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, okay? And there's a quote, sometimes it comes off as, he's quoted as saying 10,000 and sometimes as 1,000, but in either instance, it's very illustrative of why you don't give up. And the quote goes something to the effect of, you know, I had to fail 10,000 times or 1,000 times before I got it right. And what if he had stopped at 900? What if he had stopped at 50? Somebody else probably would have come up with a light bulb, but you get the point there. He kept trying and he learned from it each time. So in most business environments, however, you do not have 10,000 tries. So you do have to recognize when you have to cut losses and move forward. But it's important to embrace the opportunities that come from risks. And the last thing that I want to say about risks is you can't get caught up in what's called paralysis of analysis. Okay, when you're constantly weighing the pros and the cons and you don't move at all. Sometimes you've just got to step forward and see if it works. Okay, so here is our first exercise. What I want you to do is to take a couple of moments and think about, in your business setting right now, what is the one thing that you've been doing the same way over and over again for years, that if you let go, or if you took a risk, you would have a breakthrough in your business. So just take a few moments and think about that. What is a risk that you've been avoiding, you've been ignoring? And if you were to step out and try it, it could result in a huge breakthrough for you. Yes.
That's my one thing here.
Yes.
Not to do it.
Yes, yes, your one thing, right? That's just a space for you to write it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's okay that you put it there. That's fine. Yes. Because I just broke it up that way, so in case you wanted to take notes above and write your one thing below, you could.
Okay.
But that is for you to use, and it's for your reference, so you're fine. Okay, has everyone kind of had a chance to think through that? Okay. All right, so the next thing that you want to think about is embracing innovation and creativity. And one thing about being in a corporate setting, particularly if you're in one that is regulated, how many of you are in heavily regulated industries like healthcare and like nuclear, energy, or just where everything you do is just really, the banking industry, finance industry? How many of you in heavily regulated industries? Okay. All right, so about half and half. Okay. Because in regulated industries, you are going to have a little bit less creativity in sometimes how you deliver certain services, how, especially in healthcare, you know, how you are able to get your clients, and in banking, you know, what you're able to do and some of the risks that you have to take. So everything, of course, that I'm saying has to be in relation to the regulations that apply to you. But even within those regulated industries, you still can embrace creativity in how you work with your team and how they get the regulated things that they have to do accomplished. And the thing that you want to be committed to is continuous improvement and excellence development. And like yesterday, I'm drawing a blank on which one of the speakers in the plenary session, but talked about the concept of Kaizen, okay? And that is a commitment to continuous small improvements every day, or as a regular part of what you do. And a lot of times, what organizations do, what people do, what teams do, is they wait till something goes wrong to evaluate and assess the way they do their business, the way whatever systems that they use. But in theory and in practice, if you are continuously thinking about things that you can improve on a regular basis, and it is a part of the way you do business, then it is less likely that you have the big breakdown, and it is more likely that you continuously improve your performance, and you have a trend of your performance going up as opposed to having inconsistent highs and lows. And all of this also has to be done in relation to having a vision for where your organization is going. Because every organization, every industry, there are signs that tell you kind of what the trends are, or where your organization is going. And it's important to have a laser-sharp focus on what's going on right now in relation to what's likely to happen in the future. Because success is dynamic. The market is dynamic. And if you have a stagnant approach or a very rigid approach to implementing change, then you're not going to be able to respond quickly when you need to. So it's important to work to really focus on what really matters and what's going to help you to execute as opposed to planning. Because sometimes we get a little bit too caught up in planning and we don't get firmly into execution. So now I want you to think about what are the changes or improvements, or what if you just tweaked one little something in the way you deliver your services, the way you connect with other departments, just something about what you do. What if you changed it, you tweaked it, you abandoned it, would have an exponential impact on your organizational improvement or on your team performance. So just think about, like, what's the one thing? And you can even be fantastic in thinking about it. It doesn't even have to be something that's practical, but just think about, if this disappeared, or if these two things magically align themselves, it would have an exponential impact. And the reason it's important to think big like that, because right now it's fantastic. 100 years ago, this was fantastic, But somebody had a vision years ago that led to the creation of this tool that we now take for granted. So it's important in your innovation and creativity that you don't start your vision with what's practical and what's likely to accomplish right now, but you start your vision with, wow, if I were able to do this, then that would just change the world. And then you can figure out how you build up to that. So just take a few moments and think about your one thing that if it were to happen, it would have an exponential impact. Not just, ooh, it'd be great, but like, wow.
Maybe that this one idea suddenly explode in other
Oh,
little
yes.
Because you say
Yes.
one thing, it was like 50
Yes,
different.
yes. And I'm challenging you to do one thing just so you won't be overburdened and think you have to come up with 5 or 10. But if you come up with more than one, then by all means write that down. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the next thing. Looks like everyone is about ready. All right, so the next thing that entrepreneurs really have to focus on is having initiative. Because, again, they operate in a structure where they've got to respond to the market very, very quickly. So in order to have initiative, remember when I talked about that vision, you've got to have a very sharp focus on the present in relation to where you need to be in the future. So it's like you have to have double vision. You know, you have to be looking about, okay, what's going on right now? Not in a paranoid way or an unfocused way, but you've got to always think about, well, what's next? And the way that you learn what's next is you have to connect with the people you're serving. That's why I said it's important to think about the people that you're leading, where they are, and where they're going to go. Because the stakeholders in your team, they're going to be internal stakeholders because each department works in relation to another. And then you're going to have external stakeholders, your customers, your shareholders, the regulators, you know, the general public that benefits from your services. So you're always going to have these internal and external stakeholders. And so it's important to have, again, that's why creativity and innovation is important, because it's stimulating change, it's stimulating action. So in your everyday planning, your monthly, your quarterly planning, you've got to really be thinking about, you know, what could happen 5 years from now? And in some industries, what could happen next year? You know, with respect to, let's just say, using the smart pad, for example, you know, Apple and Samsung and all the different people in this space, they're thinking about quarter to quarter what the changes are. Because they come out with a new iPhone, new Galaxy, new whatever they've got out there, pretty much every year. So it's always in relation to the speed of your market, but you've always got to be thinking ahead. So what I want you to think about now is, what is the one opportunity that you have to completely change your industry and how you deliver your services or your products? What is your example of going from an iPod to the iPhone? Because the iPod is one little service, delivers music, delivers videos. iPad, iPhone, for example, it's got everything. It's a computer. But just think about, you know, what is the one opportunity that you have to completely change your industry or your service delivery or your area of responsibility? Okay, so now we will move on to the next thing, and I want to start out with a little story. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Chicken Little. I know I've got one person that at least should have heard of Chicken Little. Okay, you know about Chicken Little. Chicken Little, okay, great, was a little little chicken, and he was walking through the forest one day. Something pops him in his head, and he goes into a panic. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. And he goes through his neighborhood, through his village where he lives. He tells everybody the sky's falling. Everybody goes into a panic. And what turns out to be at the end is an acorn has fallen from a tree onto his head. So the sky had not fallen. It was something much, much smaller than that. But that is a great illustration of how it is important to practice rational crisis management. Okay? Because had Chicken Little stopped for a moment to think about, what are the different things that could have fallen on my head other than the sky, okay, he would not have put the entire village into panic. And had someone else simply asked him, okay, so what happened, where was it, can you show me? If they had just asked him a few questions instead of just responding to his panic, then all of that pandemonium would not have happened. So if you're going to be progressive in an industry, in a business, you definitely cannot be Chicken Little. Because there are acorns that fall out of the sky every day. Sometimes it's an irate customer. Sometimes it's a difficult team member. Sometimes it's a problem that you're having difficulty solving. And sometimes it's a downright collapse of a system of some kind. So it's important to practice rational crisis management. And sometimes it's easier said than done, but you've got to be calm in the midst of a storm. And so it's important to have fact-driven decision-making. Fact-driven decision-making. Because going back to Chicken Little, that was an emotional-based decision. Something happened, he responded, and all of these different things began to happen. He did not check for the facts. Sometimes these facts have to be collected in a matter of minutes. Sometimes you have months to respond to it, which is important to go back to the point about having that future vision in the present. Because if you're watching trends, you are able to understand the likelihood of an acorn dropping. You kind of see the writing on the wall, as they say. So it's important to make fact-based decisions, but also to make them quickly, but make them in reason and not out of fear. So what I want you to think about now is, what are the acorns in your industry, in your business, in your team, in your organization? What is the worst thing that could happen to your business, and how would you prepare for it? And while you're thinking about that, I'll just say, in healthcare and in any safety industry, they have a process of where they think about disaster planning. And the idea is that the disaster never occurs. You don't want the disaster to occur, but if it does, you have a plan. So I want you to think about that. What is something that could shift in your organization? Is it someone leaving? Is it something externally impacting you from the market? Is it something that could happen in your life? And the thing to focus on is that you've always got to have a plan, which is actually one of the next things I'm going to talk about. I want you to just think about that. What's the worst thing that could happen? And what are some of the things that you could do to address it? Okay, I think just about everyone's finished, right? We're finishing. So we'll move on to the next one, which is what I had alluded to, is it's all about having a plan. And not just a plan, but a strategic plan. And a strategic plan is based in what? Strategy, okay? Where you've given it some thought. It's based on facts. You're thinking about not only where you are, but where you're going, and you have built into that actions that support what you want to do. Because many times organizations, people, they come kind of like New Year's resolutions, okay? Where you make this resolution, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You come up with a plan, but then you don't change your behaviors and your actions to support the plan. So entrepreneurs really don't have the luxury of, kind of just waiting on things to happen. So you've really got to think about putting in place mindset, behavior, actions, resources that enable you to actually execute your plan. Because if your plan is not one that can be executed, it's just a cute little document, it's just something that you've come up with. So there are 3 rules with respect to plans. The first is, you got to have a plan. It really shouldn't be, it really can't be haphazard. And a plan literally could be 3 bullets on a Post-it note, okay? There are so many business deals, business just explosions that have occurred from just writing the discipline. Writing gives significance. Writing down things on a napkin, on a Post-it note. But of course, the more sophisticated it is, the better. But it doesn't have to be too sophisticated to where it's all this pageantry and no action. Then the second rule is your rule must be fluid, responsive, and measurable. How do you know when you've succeeded? How do you know when you've reached what it is that you want to do? There has to be a way to measure it. It's either time, like a great acronym for it is SMART. It is specific, it is measurable, it is, thank you, and it is relevant, and it is time-based, okay? So it is specific, measurable, action-based, relevant, timely, okay? So give yourself a deadline, and that either you've achieved it by that time period or you haven't. And so you don't want to say, I want to be the best department in my organization. What is that? What is best? There's always some kind of benchmark for best. And either you can look to other organizations. Many industries have industry-wide benchmarks. It's important for you, even if you are not the boss, the CEO, the VP, you need to know what the metrics are that define success for what you do. Because if you don't know that, how are you going to deliver that? Because your boss can tell you, the chief, whomever, can tell you what it is, but that's something that if you want to propel your performance and your ability to influence, that's something that you need to know. So what are the benchmarks that define success for your industry or for your area? So the thing that I want you to think about is, are you disciplined? Are you stubborn? Or are you haphazard? Discipline, haphazard. So discipline is you have a way of, you have a system for doing things, you're structured, and for the most part, you're reliable. You stick to your plan. Stubborn is you are rigid in your plans and you don't respond to kind of what's going on. This is my plan and I'm going to stick to it and I'm not going to change, and you're not even aware of influences that are happening. And then haphazard is you don't have a plan. You just kind of get up and roll with the flow. So I want you to think about that. Are you disciplined? Are you stubborn? Are you haphazard? Or maybe even a combination of the 3. And then what would happen if you changed? What would happen if you altered your style and your approach to doing things so that you are deliberate in what you're doing each day or over each period? So think about that for a moment. Okay, disciplined, stubborn, yes, or haphazard. And again, discipline, you have a system, you're pretty reliable, you know why you're doing things, you're deliberate. Stubborn is you have a plan and you rigidly stick to it without being responsive to the changes around you. And that's either because you don't know what they are or you don't care what they are. And then, now I'll say this, sometimes you have to have a little bit of stubborn persistence.
I want to
Yes.
ask you something
Yes.
about that,
Yes.
because something that happened to me is that sometimes I don't know where is the line that divides to be stubborn and flexible and not changing, because sometimes I have a line to follow.
Okay.
But the environment change and things, I'm receiving signals and I want to change things. But then I have some people around me in my team that are, no, but you have to stick to this. But I see things differently, and I'm debating myself whether
Yes.
I have to change or just to be stubborn and stay like that.
Right.
How do you know
Okay.
where is the limit, or
Right.
where is the line that divides these two?
Right, and I think a good way to think about it is when if you're on a trip, a road trip, okay? You have a destination. You're trying to get from here to, I don't know, give me a destination that you can drive to Paris, okay? You're going to drive from here to Paris, okay? And you know that it is crucial for you to get to Paris, all right? But is there more than one way to get to Paris? Yes. All right. So on the one hand, what you're looking at is choosing different routes. So you can be stubborn and stay on this route because it's the route you've chosen. Yet, if you were simply to switch to another highway or fly instead of drive, you know, that's a shift in strategy, but not a shift in your goal. You have remained consistent to what your goal is. You're going to get to Paris, okay? So you have to think about it as that way first is, okay, do I just need to simply change the way, the route, the strategy for achieving the goal? Or instead of Paris, do I need to go to Berlin? Okay, now those are two different locations, obviously, okay? So not only there are you changing strategy, you're changing goals, you're changing direction, you're changing resources, okay? And the thing to determine between whether you're being stubborn or haphazard in making that change, can you explain why you need to go to Berlin instead of Paris? Or did you just say, forget it, I'm not going to go to Paris, I'm going to go to Berlin? Okay, so it's all thinking about, that's why it's important to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Why is it important to go to Paris? Can you get what you need in Berlin just as easily as you can in Paris, but it's more efficient, it's more it's more cost effective, it's whatever. So it's always thinking about the why. And I've got a slide at the end that I think will illustrate this particular point in your decision making. But that's a great thing to make. That's why I said sometimes you're a combination of all three of those things. And sometimes you need to be stubborn. But the thing about it is being deliberate. Not being stubborn for the sake of, I want to go to Paris, I'm not going anywhere else, forget it. But I want to go to Paris because if I go to Paris, this goal can be achieved. These are the results that could happen. These are the benefits. And going to Berlin is going to have these risks that will be avoided by going to Paris. Okay, so does that give a good illustration of that? But it's all about being deliberate. And it's all about understanding the context, the trends. Okay? So in the Paris-Berlin situation, the road hazards, the travel conditions, the weather conditions are the examples of the trends that you need to be aware of in your industry. They're going to tell you, or be directive at least, in which way you go. Does that make sense? Okay? All right. So the next thing is balancing priorities and having strategic focus. Because one thing I can speak from as an entrepreneur is I literally, at this very moment, have 50 million things that I want to do in my business. I mean, they're just all great ideas. They're just the next best whatever. But I'm one person, and I can't do 50 million things at one time. And I have a lean business structure. Okay? So the thing is, you have to recognize that no matter how talented you are and how ambitious you are, you cannot be everything to everybody at every time. So it is important to recognize that you may be able to do all of these initiatives. You can't do them all right now. You have to schedule them over a time period. So it's important to know what's important, because sometimes what's important to us is not important to anyone else. And that's another thing that entrepreneurs have to always focus on. I may have just something I love as a product, as a service, or a way I coach, but my customers are uninterested in it. So that's not a good business endeavor for me to invest my time in. That's why going back to knowing where your people are, knowing what your trends are, you have to know what's important and have a disciplined way of thinking about that, because you can't expend all of your resources at one time, and you as an individual cannot expend all of your energy at one time. So I want you to think about now is, what is the one thing, or maybe it's two or three, that if you stopped investing your time, your energy, or your resources in right now, you could be more impactful in your organization. So what is the one thing that if you stop doing? Because a lot of times we get into the routine of, we do this report this way, this report goes to this person, you know, we do it this way, and we don't stop to think about why. Why do we have to produce this report in this manner? Why do we have to deliver it in this way? So I want you to think about it, you know, of the daily tasks that you may have, or the monthly tasks that you may have. What is the one thing right now that takes up a lot of your time, a lot of your energy and your resources, that's really not adding value to you or anyone else? And as you're thinking through this, you think about value from the perspective of, again, your internal stakeholders, your external stakeholders. You know, who is it important to? Why did you start doing it in the first place? Would anybody miss it if you didn't do it? Just kind of think through it in that way. Moving on to the next thing, it is important as an entrepreneur and in any business to be competitive. You've got to keep your competitive edge. And the example I gave earlier, you know, about just the smartphone industry, that is an industry where there are slight differences between what makes one product more superior than the other, and the need to be competitive is much higher than, say, some other industries. But you've always got to be thinking about what place are you in. And this is the thing about competitive advantage. This is not obsessive paranoia about what others are doing. Okay? It's not, oh my God, they're getting ready to do this, I need to react. It's not reactive. It's not reactive. So it is a healthy appreciation of what makes you better than anyone else, and what makes you the best selection over anyone else. And this is you as an individual, your team, and your organization and your industry. So it's important to recognize, and I always like to use athletes as an analogy. You know, we just finished the Olympics, right? And you think about the athletes. These are the athletes that are performing at the highest in the world. Okay? And we have those who went there and didn't place at all. You have those who went there, placed gold, silver, bronze. Do you think silver trained for silver? The person whatever person got a silver medal, did they go, boy, I'm going to train so I can get a silver medal? Boy, I'm trained, so I just want to be on the stand, you know? No, they're training for the gold, okay? And the person who got silver is thinking about, what could I have done differently, or what could I do differently next time so that I can be the gold? And so in your industry, and as an individual, because you are competing in a collaborative way, because competition isn't bad, okay? Competition isn't bad when you view it as a way to continuously improve yourself, okay? So you are always in competition with your peers, okay? As a team member. Your industry, your organization is always literally in competition with its competitors in the market. But your focus shouldn't be on what is my competitor doing. But again, if you know your people, you know your stakeholders, internal and external, your question should be, what can I do today, or what am I doing today that makes me first place, gold? And what can I do tomorrow that makes me gold plus? Okay? Because you can't wait till silver gets close up on you to then change your strategy, because that's reactive. So that's why it's important to think your vision of where you are in the present, where you want to go in the future, and be aware of the trends. So you have to have a firm understanding and be able to articulate what sets you apart. What sets you apart? So what I want you to think about now is, what is the one thing that sets you apart individually from your peers? And how can you be more deliberate about your growth? What is the one thing that you need to learn, the skill you need to acquire, the skill you need to get rid of to help you be competitive so that you're able to take on new opportunities? So what sets you apart? And basically, what can you do to ensure that you remain competitive? You remain the goal.